And we are live. Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another bit of breaking news. It seems like all the news has been breaking this week. We got done with our Star Wars discussion a couple of days ago, but now we have another cinematic trilogy, or like just general franchise juggernaut, if you will, with Lord of the Rings, which is a franchise we haven't really talked about all that much on the channel, despite it being my favorite film trilogy of all time. Amazon Studios have acquired the rights and have got a multi-season deal to make just Lord of the Rings and I guess Middle-earth TV shows now. So this is pretty big news. We don't really talk about much TV and things like that, but we thought that this was big news to talk about. I'm joined tonight with James and Naomi, returning after quite a while. Our fellowship has assembled to talk some Lord of the Rings. How are you guys tonight?
Not bad.
Want this news because honestly I find Lord of the Rings just to be so perfect, and I don't understand like big studios like Amazon, what they're doing, because if something's already that good, why reboot it? Why capitalize on something that's already been so acclaimed? I mean, how many Oscars had Return of the King won?
Did it get 11? I think it got 11. I'll have to double check that.
Most received movies for getting Oscars. I can't talk tonight, as you can tell.
James, what about you?
You see, unlike you two, I don't think Lord of the Rings is a perfect trilogy. I think it's
for me.
it's overblown, and it's well produced, but it's overwritten and it's not well edited, and it's like the books. It's a series of very, very pretty descriptions with some good character moments, bookended by just very poor editing. I struggle to sit through them these days. I remember when they came out, they were amazing. They were something incredible, but going back to them, I don't know. I find them kind of tedious. I guess I would think that the idea of there being a TV show, like some new way of tackling it, would be great. Because that's, a new sort of medium maybe would be more appropriate. But I can't see it. For my issues with the Lord of the Rings films, not that they're not great films, they are. I just have my own issues with them.
Yeah,
my own issues, man. I just don't know if a TV series is the way to address those problems. A TV series tends to be quite, you have longer episodes, you have more sort of like character moments, which could be good, but I kind of feel like, I don't know if that'll address those kind of lengthy issues with the scene.
Yeah, so this is actually really difficult to talk about because this is kind of a lot of information, because I feel like we need to talk about the movies, the text, our thoughts of what the show is going to be about, and just the situation itself. So, yeah, I mean, this news came out last week, I believe, or a couple of weeks ago, saying that Amazon were discussing with the Tolkien estate acquiring the rights to Lord of the Rings and the other works of Tolkien to start producing things. And the only thing we really have to go on at the moment is a line where they say that Amazon Lord of the Rings series will be set in Middle-earth and explore new storylines preceding Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring. The deal includes a potential additional spin-off series. So I read that, and I mean, it still hasn't been announced yet if this is going to be a full-on reboot of the entire Middle-earth saga as we know it, if it's going to still fit into the movie franchise, if it's going to like loosely play with the canon that's come before. But I think all things are pointing to this being pretty much its own thing. But they're going about it in an interesting way, because I think that The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are definitely the two most accessible texts that Tolkien's written. And when I read that, when I hear preceding The Fellowship of the Ring, that points to either it could be a bridging series between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, although I don't think much really happens in the Legendarium in that 60-year time period. They could do The Hobbit again and maybe do it justice this time, because I wasn't fond of the Hobbit trilogy. It did have some good moments.
No random love stories.
No, yes, hopefully not. But I'm kind of hoping that this is a Silmarillion series, because I think fans of the Lord of the Rings, and they wanted the Hobbit for ages, like 10 years later they got it. And then really the other big major text of the Middle-earth saga, the Middle-earth legend, is the Silmarillion, and that hasn't been touched. But that book is structured in such a unique and like challenging way. I don't think you could ever do it justice in a movie. You would have to pick like a storyline from that. For anyone who doesn't know, the Silmarillion is like a collection of stories. It's split into 3 parts. You've essentially got the creation of Middle Earth, and it's almost written like the Bible. The middle part delves with like the gods, like creating the Maya, like Gandalf and Sauron and everything like that. And then there's a story in there, which is the bulk of it, which covers the first age of Middle Earth. So I think they'd have to pick like one story. But as you said, like with the, if you've got more time to play with in a TV series, if you've got like a 12-hour TV series, then the options are endless really with what you can do with it. And I think that the Silmarillion would definitely be suited more for a TV series than a movie franchise.
I
agree with you there. Like, it definitely seems like you could have expanded on it, and by saying like it's in 3 parts, you could easily have like one season do this, one season do that. With TV series, you definitely seem to have a lot more room to expand on things. But I remember like reading reports from like before Jackson even touched Lord of the Rings by loads of people saying, "Oh, it's a book series that it's unfilmable," and then once Jackson did it, it was like, so you never exactly know, but at the same time, it's still worrying because I mean, streaming services like Netflix have adapted many books before, like they did Series of Unfortunate Events, which arguably is better than the film version that they did. But they also did Death Note, and well, and
I think if it is going to be the Silmarillion, and that would, I think it points to that being like the sensible option. If it is preceding Lord of the Rings, it makes sense to go Silmaril. Yes, I think sort of an American Horror Story way, you know, different seasons covering new stories. So I do think if it was going to be set out like that, you know, you'd have either a season, or even if it was only like short, like longer episodes. But you know, you have an episode on the Valaquenta, so you know, the story of Melkor. You have episodes based around the Kenta Silmarillion. You know, the formation of the Silmarils. You have you know, an episode on the Akhalabeth, the rise and fall of Numenor. I think that makes sense. I think from a TV series perspective, you know, or they'll cover Children of Hurin, or they'll cover I don't know, the formation of Dale, and yeah, I think it makes sense that it would be a series of isolated points in history rather than something leading up, unless they do. Oh no, I've just thought what it's going to be.
What do you think?
Oh, it's going to be the childhood of Aragorn, isn't it?
Oh God, I hope not. I really hope not.
No.
It could be. I mean, he is about 100 years old by the start of.
Well, remember one of the last scenes of Battle of the Five Armies. Go north. There is a ranger amongst their ranks. You should meet him. His father Arathorn was a great man. His son, his real name, you must find out for yourself. It's good. Yeah, it might be. That might be the spin-off.
That could be that.
Oh.
No, but when they made when The Hobbit was in pre-production, I mean, the Hobbit trilogy is renowned for like going through pre-production hell. Like Guillermo del Toro was originally on board to direct. They didn't get the green light from the studio. I think they were still ironing out. I think MGM had some of the rights. I think Warner Brothers wanted some of the rights, and then that animated film that came out in the 70s, it was a whole like percentage like people were demanding, so they had to iron that out. He dropped off the project, but his original plan was to do a 2-film split of The Hobbit, which I think would have worked a lot better. And then when a 3rd film was introduced, they talked about doing a bridging movie between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And I think plans for that were written, but then eventually scrapped. So maybe with Warner Brothers still involved, they'd go back to that if that option's still there to bridge the two. But then if it is taking place within the movie canon as we know it, you're clearly not going to have any of the same actors come back, because that will be too much for a streaming service like this, like Amazon Studios.
No, I think
it's going to be a lot more shrunk down.
It makes sense.
I think I remember.
Sorry. It makes sense that it would take the approach similar to the Middle Earth games that have just come out, the Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, where they exist in their own canon but draw from the aesthetic and characters of the current existing series. So I think it would make, and that way you would avoid the worry of going, oh, it's Legolas, but it's not played by Orlando Bloom. It can be played by, I don't know, Dave from accounting. It doesn't really matter. So I think that would, and it gives it that level of freedom with its own writing to say, well, it doesn't matter that it doesn't exactly match up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go on,
sorry.
Amy. Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, because I remember, I think it was either earlier this year, sometime last year, by Peter Jackson saying that he wanted to tackle this Sumerian can't pronounce things. But yeah, like how that was his next plan to do. So I don't know if he's going to be involved in the TV series, if that's going to be a separate project on its own, what's going to happen with it, whether or not it's just going to be a random series just all about Sam's children. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because, like, the films with Peter Jackson, I think even the Tolkien estate were very vocal that they didn't like Peter Jackson's take on what they did with the works of Tolkien. They said that he essentially dumbed it down and made them into action movies, which I can see elements of. I think personally, with like Peter Jackson, I think the way he adapted Lord of the Rings certainly is the only way that you could have adapted those books for the big screen in terms of condensing everything down, making it flow narratively, and just I think the films are perfect. I'll disagree with you, James, on that one, but you know everyone has their own opinion.
Not enough of the songs, Chris. Not
You're gonna
enough
get-
musical
Well,
breaks.
I watch a series on YouTube where a guy usually does compare the books to the films and sees like the changes in it.
Mhm.
He hasn't done Lord of the Rings, but he has done Hobbit. But I know that there are loads of changes from the books to the film, but that's obviously because it's a completely different medium.
Yeah.
And obviously from one it's not going to exactly flow with the other. I mean, like in the adaptation from Dune, having everybody's just thoughts come out with nobody talking, just changing perspective, that's annoying in the film.
Mm. But I mean, with this now, the Amazon have got the go ahead, and they've been in talks with the Tolkien estate. So clearly, the Tolkien estate have a lot of faith in what ideas they brought to the table, what Amazon want to do with it. But let's say this is a completely different thing now. Let's say that it isn't going to take place within the movies. It's going to start its own franchise now of Middle Earth, its own unique take on it. I guess I'm open to that. I mean, with books, it's different. If you have like an original film and then you remake that, that's when I tend to have a problem with it. If it's like a book adaptation, I guess you could, like with comic book movies, for example, let's take the character of Batman. You can keep, in my opinion, you can keep doing loads of different iterations of that character because it's an adaptation of the source material. And I guess I should allow that with Lord of the Rings as well. But I think when a film achieves such a level that those films have in the collective consciousness and pop culture, in just movies in general, I don't think you can. And even if they do the Silmarillion, if they do the Hobbit, if they eventually get to Lord of the Rings or whatever they're going to tackle first, people are just going to naturally keep comparing it. That is unavoidable. Every cast member that's announced, every character design, every look of the world, it's always going to keep being compared to it. And also, this is a TV series we're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, TV can be fantastic. If you look at what they can do with Game of Thrones, with HBO, that is probably the closest show I've seen to achieving somewhat of a cinematic quality with what it can do, especially in the recent few seasons. But even still, it's not at the level of Lord of the Rings, and it never will be because it's a different medium. It's TV. It will never have that much budget compared to a feature film. And I think for Lord of the Rings, maybe even for The Hobbit as well, I don't know. I think you need that feature film budget to truly do it justice, not in terms of the location shooting, the special effects and everything like that. This must be like a scaled down version of what they're going to do. And I think that's going to limit it significantly.
I agree with you there. Like the first season of Game of Thrones hasn't got a low because it was pretty much made on a.
Well, they had to cut out the battle scene in season 1, didn't they? They did. Tyrion gets knocked on the head. Yeah.
No, they couldn't afford horses. But yeah, I definitely agree with you when it comes to something being so big that it's obviously going to have so many comparisons to it. That's the same problems to the recent Disney live action remakes because they've just announced that they're doing Lion King with so many great actors, yes, but they recast James Earl Jones as Mufasa, who was in the original. And
no, James Earl Jones is still in the new one.
Yeah, I know. I said he's being recast in it.
Oh, I thought you meant they changed actor. My bad.
No. Like he's still the same role as like what he was originally. So, and it just, for me, it just seems like too soon to do it. And it's the same here. It's too soon to even think about like something different to Lord of the Rings. Yes, it would be a different medium, and they would have to do different liberties to adapt it well. Whatever they do, it's always going to be compared to the Peter Jackson trilogy. It's always going to be there, and especially because, like I said, it has so many Oscars to its name. It's always going to be in the shadow of that, and it's never, well, even if it has like fans, and probably will do, no matter what, whether it's fresh or rotten, there will be some people that like it. Fans, it will be original Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, your internet. You're right. I was gonna say your internet's breaking up a little bit there, Naomi. But I think we got most of that.
Thanks, Virgin.
Go on, James.
I'll be the voice of dissent then. I don't. First of all, it is going to be compared to Lord of the Rings, but the same is true of basically anything in that genre. So, no matter what you do, if it's fantasy, it's going to get compared to Lord of the Rings. So why it's an issue with it that's non-existent. If you're a producer of a fantasy series or of a fantasy film or a TV show, you just don't care about that then, because that is already, it's going to happen. So why bother about it? There is going to be a subset of people who go, "Oh, it's not. It's like this in comparison. So why care?" You're right about it being smaller scale, but then it's kind of a moot point. They're not adapting Lord of the Rings. It's going to be set before Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So I think actually, now the more I think about it, the more I think the idea of it being, say, the story of Aragorn as a young ranger makes more sense. Or, say, the story of related characters in that small setting. So you might see, I don't know, a young Theoden or a young Denethor, or you might see, at the risk of it turning into young Indiana Jones, you might see bits of it that are set in the formation of those key kingdoms. I think if it's going to be like anything, it's going to be like Game of Thrones, possibly, in that they take that sort of vaguely political slant that happens to also have orcs and magic happening in the background.
Yeah.
You know, I think and that would suit the lower budget and the lower scale. So you're more likely to see young Aragorn doing his ranger training with the sons of Elrond, rather than have Elrond in it and have to worry about recasting Hugo Weaving. You'll have Elladan and Elro here, rather than having, you have a young Aragorn and a young Arwen, so you don't have to worry about people going, "Oh, it's not Viggo Mortensen. Oh, it's not Liv Tyler." You know, you have, I was going to say young Legolas, but he's never looked particularly old.
if it's funny, he looks older in The Hobbit than he does in Lord of the Rings.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's how time works, Chris, with
I
actors.
think it's the way. I think it's the way.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point you bring up about Game of Thrones, because I think Game of Thrones was definitely a big driving force as to how this idea of a TV show came about. Because let's be honest, Game of Thrones is going to be wrapped and finished within 2 years. And true, they do have ideas for, I think they've said, at least 3 spin-off series after Game of Thrones finishes, because, it's that cash cow. They got to keep milking it. It's still popular. But in terms of like the main series of Game of Thrones, it's going to be finishing in 2 years. Fantasy TV right now is huge. Everyone's talking about Game of Thrones still, even in the years that it's away. The merchandise is crazy. Everyone loves it. Everyone talks about it. It's one of the biggest cult TV shows out there when it airs. And with Amazon, I mean, I haven't looked at any of the shows from Amazon. I know they have some big names, but it feels like they're behind on the competition, certainly behind Netflix and things like that. Which way do you counter that? Announce a fantasy TV series, not just any fantasy TV series, but a Lord of the Rings one. That's a huge name. I think that might even, it won't topple Netflix, but Netflix has some big shows. But if Amazon are touting a Lord of the Rings TV show, or just Middle-earth in general, that's massive. That is absolutely huge. And I think that will definitely be the show that other people might go to following Game of Thrones, or with Game of Thrones fans now getting into fantasy maybe through that TV series. This will be a through line into this one now. So I definitely think Game of Thrones was a big reason as to why this was even on the cards in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd go with that. Like Amazon, I have Amazon Prime, and so I've seen like what original TV shows they have, which is usually like I think American Gods, Man in High Castle. I've seen some of Man in High Castle. That's done well, but there are still loads of problems with it.
Mhm.
It is a good idea to have like the big name that will draw people into, especially like, oh, we have Lord of the Rings. Oh, but you can only see it if you're subscribed to us. Give us all your money, that kind of thing. So I can see why it's doing it, but if it's that alone, then I don't know how the production is going to go with that. I don't know how faithful they are going to be to material, whether they're going to keep completely something new, writing team, but whether they do that or whether it's just name and then we'll just go piss poor on what's there, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's likely that they're not going to pay attention to the source material. Like I said, if it's going to be set before, they'll just do Chronicles of Middle Earth. Do you know what I mean? Rather than it being drawn from. And and it makes sense.
When you said Chronicles of Middle Earth, it made it sound like Chronicles of Narnia, so they're just going to have Aslan coming to Middle Earth.
Why not?
Because I was talking to George earlier on the channel. He was the one who sent me the link in the first place, and we were talking a little bit about it. I don't think he's too hot on the idea, but then again, he's not a massive Lord of the Rings fan. But I was saying that when I read the news, I thought instantly Silmarillion series, or at least like the extended history of Middle Earth, that is what will get made. But he doesn't think it will be. I think he was thinking of something more in line of what James was saying, like young Aragorn, because he said that if you say you've got like a Lord of the Rings TV series and you go boom Silmarillion, 9 people out of 10 probably won't have even know what a Silmarillion is or a Silmaril or what the book is or what the story is about, and it won't be very accessible. Like the Hobbit, as I said, the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are definitely the most prominent too. But if you have like a sub-series which ties into characters they know from the films, like an Aragorn, like a Legolas, like an Arwen, or whatever, that will probably be the way they go. And I kind of hope they don't do that, because it's going to be the whole prequel thing. Like, you know that none of the characters are going to be in peril because they survived for Lord of the Rings. That's just any trap that a prequel has. But I think that it will be too beholden to what's come before. It will be filled with those really cringeworthy tie-ins and nods and winks and nudges to the audience, which The Hobbit was guilty of as well, that movie franchise. And I really don't want that. If they are doing this, if this is going to be like new stories in Middle-earth, I'd rather them just have faith in that, have faith in their new characters they're going to create, or characters from the Silmarillion, if it should be that, and just dedicate everything to that, to create new characters in this world that we can then get behind and learn more about and like, hopefully, as much as we do Lord of the Rings. For me, though, and this, I guess we'll wrap it up now, like my final thoughts on it. I'm against it in a way because I think that they'll never match the scale, the music, the artistry, like concept from the design of the armor to everything. That is so, in my mind now, what Lord of the Rings is, and it'll be very difficult to distance myself from that. However, if they do eventually get into a Hobbit series, if they do eventually get into a Lord of the Rings series with a TV structure, maybe it will be more faithful. You're going to have a lot more hours to play with. Maybe we will finally get Tom Bombadil in there, for example, and the Barrow Downs and the Barrow Whites. Yay! Maybe, James, we will get all those songs that we oh so desperately wanted from the source material.
All I want, Chris, is Lord of the Rings, the musical. By Tim Minchin and Stephen Sondheim. That'll do.
Hey ho, the Dario Tom Bombadillo. Let's get it going.
It's all I really wanted from Lord of the Rings. I don't care about the dragons and the dwarves.
But then again, it might be interesting to see another take on Lord of the Rings, what someone else could do with it. You know, I don't know. That's just so I don't know. I'm mixed on it. I'm gonna have to wait until pictures come out or a trailer or anything like that. But it's, as they are my favorite films, and that is Lord of the Rings to me, it's gonna be nigh and impossible for me to distance myself from it at this stage, anyway.
Fair enough. I've
final thoughts.
Talked myself around in favor of it. I think, like, the more I've spoken about it, the more I'm actually kind of optimistic. Obviously, we don't know anything about it, but I think it's a chance to use the name to tell some good news stories. It obviously had to happen because, you know, Game of Thrones, they had to have their own version of it that stands against Game of Thrones and Shannara, and stands against the new Witcher TV series that's being made. But yeah, I like the idea that they could use it to tackle or to tell stories that are set in the world and sort of flesh out the legendarium without it being shackled to the Hobbit or to the Lord of the Rings. necessarily. I do think it'll be young Aragorn. Now I've said it. I do think that makes the most sense.
Be Kit Harington is cast as young Aragorn. I can see it now.
Who never changes
Yeah.
his face.
Yeah, it'll probably be Kit Harington.
It's true.
They won't need...
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic for once.
Yeah. Naomi, final thoughts?
I will need to see more of what they do, like what it actually is, what like you said, first trailer, first photos and everything, just to get a clear idea of what it is. I'm not on board, I will be honest here. I mean, I want to have an open mind when it comes to these things. Like, even if they do remakes like this, or reboots, or sequel prequels, whatever this season is going on for. Keep an open mind. But from what I've been looking at, I mean, Sean Austin, who plays Samwise Gamgee, says that he's on board for whatever they do. So I'm happy that at least one of the cast members has said I'm happy that this is happening. But to me, because Lord of the Rings has been so much a part of my childhood, I've loved it so much. I'm not on board. Even whatever they do, I need to be convinced, Amazon. I need to be convinced.
I think they just hit the stage where they realized that we're probably not going to get any more Middle-earth movies out of the movies because we can't get the rights to the Silmarillion or anything like that. But we have TV now and we can still make that money on Middle-earth. I don't know, but that'll do it for our thoughts on Amazon Studios making a Lord of the Rings TV series. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you think of this TV series. Are you for the idea? Are you against it? Which scenes from the book that haven't been adapted would you like to see in the TV series? Any speculation or anything like that, please do get commenting down below. Yeah, so that'll do it from us. And I'm not sure what the next video is going to be on the channel. It might be a reaction from me. It would most likely be the news or Justice League review this weekend. So stay tuned for that because I'm sure that's going to be anything but an eventful review. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.